Hello, and welcome to today's episode. Today we're going to be ranking all of the letters on a tier list, all 26 letters in the English version of the Latin alphabet, plus 3 extra ones that I felt like I would rank just for fun. And as you can see on the left here, I didn't think it was right to use letter tiers to rank letters. Like, what if I didn't want to put S in S tier or F in F tier? So instead, I just renamed all the tiers. They're the same as they would be otherwise, but I just think it's fun to have words instead of letters. So that we're going to go in alphabetical order. So let's get right into it. We're starting with the letter A, which I'm going to put in good tier. I think it's a pretty good letter. It's not the best letter out of all of them, and it can be pronounced in a lot of different ways, but it looks nice. It's definitely not an eyesore to look at. It fits in among all the other letters. It just doesn't have anything elevating it up to the upper echelons. Next up is B, which I'm going to put in OK tier. There's nothing particularly wrong with it when it's capitalized, but when it's lowercase, it's just ripping off P, D, and Q. Like, sure, it is the first in the alphabet of those four, which is why it's not getting pushed down that hard for it, but the fact that it is basically the same as 3 other lowercase letters, and the fact that there's just nothing special about it other than that leaves it in OK tier. Next up is C, which I'm going to put in garbage tier because it is one of the worst letters in terms of actually learning to read. It's one of the most confusing letters to actually try and learn because it can make 2 different sounds just on its own, and then when you combine it with H, it can make 3 different sounds depending on the context. And then sometimes you put a T before a CH and it doesn't actually change anything about the way that it's pronounced. Not to mention that the fact that C is actually the Latin alphabet's version of gamma, which is supposed to make a G sound, and they just added something onto it to make G, which means that C is basically a knockoff of itself, and it's pretty obvious why C goes in garbage tier. Next up is D, which I'm going to put in good tier along with A. I think D is slightly better than A. There's nothing horrible about the letter D. It's more consistently pronounced than A, which is why I think it's better. But like A, it blends in amongst all the other letters. It doesn't really have anything special about it. Next up is E, which I'm going to put in great tier because it is just such a commonly used letter. And you might be like, well, isn't E one of the letters that is the most confusing when you're learning how to read? And it sort of is, but I think a lot of words that have silent E's at the end of them would be way more confusing if there weren't silent E's there. For example, in the word made, there's a silent E at the end, and if mad and made were spelled the same way, it would be way more confusing. Like, maybe there's an easier way to convey the difference in pronunciation, but E is just so helpful in a lot of scenarios. Add on to that it's the most commonly used letter in the English language, and that it also just looks really nice. And all of those things combine to make it a pretty great letter, but not enough to get into the amazing tier. Next up is F, which I'm going to put in the OK tier above B. It does look too similar to E in my opinion, although I think it's pretty easy to tell them apart compared to B, like lowercase b and D and P and Q. It does only make one sound, but is a little bit too similar to E, which also happens to be right next to it in the alphabet, which also just makes it a little bit worse. So yeah, overall, okay tier. Next up is G, which I'm going to put in the great tier below E because it doesn't deserve the credit that E gets. It's nowhere near as commonly used. It is annoying whenever it combines with its buddy H to make the GH cluster. But overall, it is the original sound that the letter gamma, which eventually evolved into both C and G, was supposed to make. So it does make sense to have G be in great tier. Also, G is the beginning letter of great. Ignore this. So I think it makes sense for G to go in the great tier. H, on the other hand, is going to go in the bad tier. It's not as egregious as C, but it does contribute to a lot of the annoying clusters you see, like CH, PH, TH, SH, GH. Basically, whenever it follows another consonant, you can guarantee that there's going to be something annoying. And don't even let me into when it's used to transcribe other languages. I feel like this is also a problem in English with putting H's at the end of stuff, but in other languages, I feel like H is just unpronounced like all the time. Like, for example, in Spanish, you never pronounce the H sound, so it's just there to be confusing. So overall, H, nah. But at least it has a reason to exist, and at least it makes its own sound that another letter doesn't make for it, so that's why it's not in the garbage tier. Next up is the letter I, which I'm going to put in the good tier, or the great tier, below G, or below E, because it's not as commonly used as E, but I think it does everything right for a vowel that a vowel should do. It's also one of the easiest letters to write. It also can be the Roman numeral 1, which is pretty neat. So overall, I think I is a pretty great letter. I also think it's really cute when it has the dot. J, on the other hand, is going to go in bad tier, below H, meaning the only letter it's better than is C. J used to be I in all the words that it exists in, and it's the first of the 4 most uncommon letters in English that we're encountering, which I'm not going to knock it down too much for that, but it is annoying that we have to have the letter just for like a very small handful of words that used to be spelled with an I. It also rips off I's little dot thing. Next up is the letter K, which I'm going to put in the amazing tier. It's the first letter I'm putting there. I just think I want to contrast it with C because K always makes the same sound. Sometimes it is combined with H, but I blame that significantly more on H than I do on K for just making everything annoying. Because KH can be confusing sometimes. But other than that, K basically always makes the K sound. It also is one of the best looking letters, in my opinion, one of the most satisfying letters to write. And it holds an exact contrast to C with only making one sound instead of making like a bazillion. So that's why K is up there. Next up is L, and I'm going to put L in the garbage tier above C because for a long time I was not able to pronounce the letter L. So this is just my personal opinion, but I don't think the letter L deserves to be anywhere besides garbage tier. But it's still better than C. C is my least favorite letter. Next up is M. I'm going to put it in the good tier below A and D. I don't think there's anything wrong with the letter M, but there's nothing spectacular about it either. The same goes for the letter N. We're going to put it there. The letter O, I'm going to put in the great tier with its vowel buddies. I think it's better than I, but worse than E. It has all the same things going for it and going against it as E and I, in that it's a vowel, so it can be used a lot, and it's pretty versatile without really ever being confusing. At least if you're a native English speaker, I think it's usually pretty intuitive how O gets used. And I also think it's pretty satisfying that it's a circle shape, so that's where it goes. P, I'm going to put in the OK tier for the same reasons I put B in the OK tier. I'm going to put below B because it is technically later on in the alphabet, so it is ripping off the letter B, if you can think about it that way. But it is otherwise basically just the same as the letter B. It does have the problem with H, but I blame that more on H than I do on P. So, yeah. Q, I'm going to put in the garbage tier above the letter C, but below the letter L. The fact that it always needs to be with the letter U is really annoying. The fact that it only appears in a select handful of words is also really annoying, and I guess I'm going to bump down every rare letter for that, so sorry, X and Z, but you're next. It's quite ugly, in my opinion, in Times New Roman, but it's also just really annoying to write in general, and it also looks like the letter O with a line through it, so it's ripping off O's thing, so I know in some languages it does make its own sound, but in English it doesn't, so for all those reasons it's in garbage tier. Next up is the letter R, which I'm going to put in amazing tier above the letter K because the K, I realize, is sometimes silent. I don't think that's bad enough to bring it down because I think every single letter is silent sometimes. So obviously that's not enough to bring K downwards. But R is silent less often than K is. So we're going to put R above K. The reason I'm putting R up at the top of the list is because it's basically the most unique sound in English, and it gets written with one letter. I can't even think of a word where it's silent, although I'm pretty sure it is silent in some sort of word, but it basically always makes the exact same sound. It is hard to pronounce for non-native English speakers, but it is not the problem with the letter R, it's the problem with the sound that the letter makes. And I haven't really been, if you've noticed, grading the sounds that the letters make. I've been grading the letters themselves. So R doesn't lose any points for that. And because of that, R is in the amazing tier. The letter S, I'm going to put in the bad tier above the letter H, but it obviously suffers from the H fever with SH. At least SH is a necessary sound, but it is kind of annoying that S can make multiple sounds, and the real reason it's here is that it has the exact same problem as C with making multiple sounds, where S can make the S sound or the Z sound. At least it makes more sense for S intuitively to make the S sound, which is its sound, but it also steals the sound of another letter, being Z, way too often. And then it also makes the J sound, which should be the letter J's thing, but it also is the letter that makes the J sound in words like fission and fusion. So overall, it's not a great letter. Next up is the letter T, which I'm going to put at the top of the tier list. I think T is probably the most satisfying letter sound to make, for me at least. Actually, no, it's going to be below K. Just because it does have the TH thing. Although, then again, TH is necessary. Although, actually, I'm going to bring it down in another tier, come to think of it. Because TH can either make the th sound or the sound. Depending on the context. Now, granted, the only pair of words in English where that actually matters is either and ether, or thy and thigh if you are talking about Old English. So it's not that big a problem, but it is kind of weird that it makes both sounds. But otherwise, I think the letter T is really nice to look at. I feel like if any letter were to be the symbol of strength, it would be the letter T. I feel like it just is the strongest letter somehow. That just makes sense to me. It's also the second most commonly used letter in English, so it gets a boost for that. And overall, I'm going to put it in the great tier. The letter U is going to go in the bad tier. I have been putting the other vowels up pretty high, but U doesn't get that. It is higher than all the other letters in the bad tier, but it just suffers from the fact that Q exists. And then GU words are also a thing that shouldn't be a thing but are, like guilt and guardian, for example, where the U just does absolutely nothing. There's also a whole thing where U can make the oo sound or the U sound or the sound, which I know other vowels can do that, but it's less intuitive for the letter U. And also, the letter U was not even the original way it was written. You might recognize in like Roman times, for example, they used the letter V exclusively, which means U was a new letter that was created, and it still has a lot of problems, so bad tier. Next up is the letter V, which I just explained that it is the original of the UVW trilogy, and it's actually going to go all the way in the amazing tier, below R but above K. This is the letter that is silent in English the least often, I'm pretty sure, although I think it's silent in a couple words. It because of the fact that U diverged from it, any time when it was used inconsistently, it basically became the letter U, which means V is only used very consistently to make the V sound. I know in a lot of other languages W also makes the V sound, but we're talking about English consonants here and English letters here, and in English, V makes the V sound. It's one of the most consistent letters, so it goes in the amazing tier. Next up is W, which goes in the garbage tier. Like, what are you doing? Stealing another letter and just making two of it, and then you can't even make up your mind as to whether you're U or V. Like, obviously, this is because U and V were still the same letter when W was created. U only branched out from V afterwards, but it also just doesn't look good. It's too wide, which M also shares that problem, but I'm gonna bring it out on W because why not? W also is the start of the 5 most annoying words in English: who, what, when, where, and why. So for that, it's got to stay in the garbage tier. Next up is X. I'm going to put X in the okay tier between B and P. Now, it should just be KS. I'm going to give you that, but X is by far the coolest letter in the alphabet by like a wide margin. Like, whenever you want something to sound cool, you use the letter X. It's always X marks the spot. X can also mean like XOXO for kisses, which is, I guess, should also get a boost for that, but I feel like it still belongs where it is. If it weren't for all the cool things about X, it would easily be between Q and C, but I think it has enough stuff saving it to put it in the OK tier. Next up is Y, which is my favorite letter, in case you were wondering. It goes in the amazing tier, obviously. I mean, I'm the one making the tier list, so I get to decide where everything goes. So, yes, that is where it goes. Although some people might say, well, isn't it confusing that it could be a consonant or a vowel? But if you actually look, it is never ambiguous whether it's a consonant or a vowel. It is sometimes ambiguous whether it makes the E sound or the I sound, but I just think it's really cool. The way it works. It has the same cool factor as X, where if you want something to seem cool, you put a Y in it instead of an I, which you can't really say for letters besides X and Y, but I just think those two letters alone make any word 10 times cooler than it would otherwise be. It also has a really interesting history, which I don't want to get into, but why? Well, that's why. Next up is the letter Z, which I'm going to put in the good tier. And because Z is there, we can now rearrange M and N, because I do think M is slightly better. But as I was saying, the only thing holding Z back is that it's uncommon. However, I think it's pronounced very consistently. Its sound is pretty fun to say. It looks like a pretty neat letter, and it does sort of make things cool. Not to the same extent as X and Y, but it does sort of make things cool. So all those things combined put it in the good tier. So for the first bonus letter, we have the Spanish letter Ñ. I'm going to put it in the OK tier. Spanish is the only language I have any experience in besides English, but I think Ñ is one of the only letters in any language that uses the Latin alphabet that's considered its own separate letter and not just a different letter with an accent mark on it. That's why I chose to include it in this tier list. I think it's better than X, but worse than B. It does make its own unique sound that doesn't exist in English, which is why it's not in English. And its history is really cool, with it starting as just putting an N on top of another N, which you can kind of see just based on the way the tilde looks. But yeah, overall, it's in the OK tier. 2 more letters to go. Next up is a proposed letter for the English alphabet, which is a combination of the letters N and G, and that is called the letter Eng. Which makes the NG sound. I'm going to put this in the great tier, right next to its buddy G, which it loves to hang out with, because I do think it would genuinely be a good addition to the English alphabet. It would save us space, and it wouldn't really cost us anything. I think it's the best possible addition to the English alphabet if you had to pick another letter to add. So that's why I'm going to put it there. Feel free to argue with me on that in the comments. I'd love to see what you think about that. The final letter I'm going to include is the old runic letter Thorn, which I'm going to put in the garbage tier above L but below W. It used to be in the English alphabet for longer than the other runes, but it is still in its heart a rune, which has mostly remained in the Middle Ages where it belongs. But nowadays, some people think for some reason that it should be brought back into the English language, which I 100% disagree with. TH is easily intuitive, and I think the fact that it makes both the th and the sounds is more intuitive than Thorn, which starts with the th sound and not the sound. I think there was a historical letter that separately made the sound at some point, which makes it even more confusing. So overall, I don't think the letter Thorn should ever come back into the English language. But comment down below if you disagree, or if you disagree with anything in the tier list. Also comment what you think I should make the tier list out of next. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss another one when it comes out. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.